Well, another day, another Zach LaVine trade news. This time, we actually have news on who the Chicago Bulls did try to target in the Zach LaVine deal that didn't go through. We're going to get to all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go into this content for the second time for today. So I just posted the daily episode. It may or may not even be up by the time you guys are watching this. Just created that episode, and as I'm uploading that episode, it came out from Jake Fischer that the Chicago Bulls actually tried to target Darius Garland in a trade with the Cleveland Cavaliers for Zach LaVine. And so that just shows that this Chicago Bulls team is still trying right now to find trades for Zach LaVine, that they're still getting back near equal talent for Zach LaVine. Now, we've all heard that the trade market for Zach LaVine is kind of low, especially when teams know you kind of have to move him. But it's surprising that the Bulls tried to target an inter-conference, or not even inter-conference, an interdivision rival to send Zach LaVine for to get another talented guard back. And now, one of the questions that this does look at, and I actually wanted to talk about this, I did talk about this a little bit on the daily episode today as well, is that you would think that the Bulls, with the way that Coby White has grown, is that they would try to target players that kind of fit what Coby White's going. Darius Garland is a player that was in Coby White's draft, that is an undersized point guard, being 6'1", 192 pounds. That may be outdated. ESPN really doesn't always update their weights, but being an undersized point guard, to pair that next to Coby White, right? We know Coby White's 6'5", almost 6'6", with a 6'5", 6'6" wingspan, and maybe the Bulls are looking at maybe Coby White turning into now that shooting guard for them going forward. But I'm not going to lie, it's kind of weird to hear that was a player that they targeted. Now, not because of the talent. We know what Darius Garland is talent-wise. He's a player that can come out and outright shoot the ball, right? When you look at it, 3 years in a row now, he's averaged over 20 points per game on over 45% shooting from the field. And right now he's shooting 34% from three-point range. But the 2 seasons prior to that, he was close to 40% from three-point range, taking 5.7 three-pointers for his career. He's also, this season averaging 5.8 assists. Last season was 7.8. The year prior to that, it was 8.6. So he's a guy as well that can pass the ball. He also averages almost 2 steals per game for his career, does Darius Garland. So not to deny the talent that Darius Garland has. He has talent absolutely on this squad. I mean, on his squad, like that's undeniable. But the question is that really when you look at it does that kind of match what we currently have on the team? Another guard, right? And I don't think you're getting a lot much other than that if that was the case, but that points towards what the mindset may be for the Chicago Bulls. Now, maybe this was a shot in the dark. The Bulls called up the Cleveland Cavaliers and just said, hey, if we were to try to do a Zach LaVine trade, would you be interested in Darius Garland? The Cleveland Cavaliers could have immediately say, hey, hell no, thank you, peace. And that could have been it over, moved with it. At that point, you're pairing Donovan Mitchell with Zach LaVine. That would have just been a weird trade. You know that other pieces would have definitely been involved in that. But to hear that's what the Chicago Bulls were kind of looking at targeting, like I said, it may point to where the mindset is and the talent level that they want back for Zach LaVine. And that may be why there's quote unquote no trade market for Zach LaVine right now. Not just because of what Zach LaVine is or isn't in the contract, but more so because what the Bulls want back in a potential Zach LaVine trade. And we've talked about it here before, is that the front office may have to realistically come down off whatever their initial thoughts were. Now, they got offered a great deal for Zach LaVine, and of course, it's hindsight. At the trade deadline last year, it was reported that they got offered R.J. Barrett, plus I can't remember who the other player was in that, 2 first-round picks and a pick swap. And they ended up turning that down at last year's trade deadline. And so the Bulls got to be now looking at it and saying, hey, how close can we get back to that same offer? Because that's one of the best offers we've heard out there for Zach LaVine over the last few years, other than, of course, some of the ones that fans make up and things like that. But the Chicago Bulls, per this Jake Fischer article, one of the teams of them, the Toronto Raptors, and the Utah Jazz are the teams that other teams around the NBA are really looking at monitoring to see what they do with blowing it all up and are just making big pieces available for other teams to kind of poach and look at. The Los Angeles Lakers continue to be a team that's linked to Zach LaVine, even in this article. And that kind of seems like maybe the most likely scenario as far as maybe the team that's willing to offer the most for Zach. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's true. We've also heard they're interested in DeMar and Alex Caruso, things like that. But to hear that Darius Garland was on the Bulls' radar, to me, may point more towards those D'Angelo Russell rumors that we've heard, right? That we've heard that the Bulls could be wanting D'Angelo Russell. Maybe that is now adds more credence. And shout out to Cornelius on the channel who's been, sent in a voicemail for that a little while ago. Maybe that does point to that. Maybe the Bulls are looking at adding point guard talent to this team and maybe moving moving Kobe White to the starting two. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that's what I would want, but when you hear things like this, it kind of makes you start wondering if that's the case for it. Now, we've also, per article, a different article from Bleacher Report, we also hear other players that right now the Chicago Bulls are targeting. This one's from Jake Simone. The Bulls are targeting in potential Zach LaVine trades, and these are names that we've heard before. Austin Reeves is number one on the list per this article, saying that the Bulls are in any trade for LaVine to go to the Los Angeles Lakers. They want Reeves to be included. And, that kind of makes sense. Like, is Reeves a perfect player? No. Is Austin Reeves what Zach LaVine is, or is he ever going to be that? Probably not, right? That's hard to predict with what Austin Reeves has been and has shown. But, hey, Austin Reeves is a player that gives effort on the defensive side of the ball. He's also a player that can fit in almost any scheme per his skill set. He's not like a lockdown shooter or anything like that, but he is also a player that you can look to shoot. Shooting the ball right now, 47% from the field, and he's shooting the ball 35% from three-point range, taking 4.5 three-pointers per game. So that kind of makes a little bit of sense in just what we've heard it could be for Zach LaVine in a type move and things like that. But hey, this is a player that apparently the Bulls have high on their list. If they do end up moving Zach LaVine, that they want Austin Reeves back in a potential trade for Zach LaVine. Now, again, like I said, I have my own issues and qualms and thought process on that and the validity around it, but I can't deny that, hey, Austin Reeves does bring something potentially that I guess the Chicago Bulls could look at to add to what they have in some of the players we already have around here. So, take that with what you will, whatever grain of salt you want to take it with. And then next up, the Bulls also in an NBA trade with the Sacramento Kings would want Davion Mitchell back in a deal like that. Now, this is another one that to me, it makes sense, at least on paper, that the Bulls would want that type of player back for Zach LaVine. Is Davion Mitchell, again, none of these players that I want to be clear here are going to give you what Zach LaVine gives you. These are young guards who could come in, add to your young core, kind of fit that timeline, feel that thing we've heard of the Chicago Bulls trying to get players that can try to win now with them, but not necessarily be those superstars, right? And so that's another player that I look at and I say, I don't hate it. I don't necessarily love it either, but this is another guard, right? 6 foot, 200-pound guard that hasn't really shown a whole hell of a lot. He has potential. He's 25 years old, but again, I would struggle to say that this is the type of player that I think would be the centerpiece of a Zach LaVine trade. And then Aaron Naismith is another one, another interdivision team here from the Indiana Pacers that they're saying the Bulls would want to target if they move Zach LaVine to that team. Now, there's nothing to be said that I haven't heard too much that the Pacers are actually interested in Zach LaVine, but this is a guy who's 6'6", 215 pounds, could theoretically come in, be that small forward for the Chicago Bulls if they do end up subsequently moving DeMar DeRozan in a separate deal. He averages 11 points per game right now. He's only started one game. He shoots the ball 54% so far in this season, 44% from his career, and he's 44% from three-point range, taking 4.5 three-pointers per game so far. This is another player that you can see kind of fitting in more so of that mindset of sliding into what we have right now. And then Caleb Martin is next up on this list. This, again, kind of makes some sense. Caleb Martin is one of those depth pieces that, again, he's an ultimate role player, can fit on any team, can do some three-point shooting, can put the ball on the floor some, has absolutely killed us in some games previously as well. And then last on this list is Jonathan Kuminga, another player that if the Golden State Warriors do get involved in the Zach LaVine business, this is a player that the Bulls would absolutely look to target in a potential trade. Doesn't mean it's the only piece, but it's a piece that they would absolutely want back in a potential Zach LaVine move. So take that list with a grain of salt. Again, this is an article from Jack Simone, so from USA Today. So you got to take what you will from that one. But I think ultimately what we're seeing is that we're starting to understand what the Bulls would want in a move for Zach LaVine. And the fact that they went high targeting somebody like Darius Garland initially, I admire the attempt to do that, right? To bring in that level of talent I just worry about the fit. But maybe the Bulls right now are going to let the chips fall where they may as far as fit, and they're looking more so at getting the most talent back possible for their highest paid player in team history. But let me know what you guys think on all that down below. Make sure you're following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.